treat we have tonight, though. I've been looking forward to this day for such a long time. It would be a fabulous night having Jill Gentile as our speaker, but to have Jonathan Lear as a discussant too, it's just beyond words. Jill, in my mind, is one of the most creative and striking writers in psychoanalysis today. And I've been rereading some of her papers because of her being here, and I was reminded again why I like them so well. Of course, I'm a great Winnicottian, and he's the person who's been the biggest influence on me. She has such a original way of expanding his work that is really something special. She's a faculty member of the NYU postdoctoral program in psychotherapy and psychoanalysis and the Institute of the Psychoanalytic Study of Subjectivity. Her book, published in 2016, is entitled Feminine Law, Freud, Free Speech, and the Voice of Desire. And Michael McCrone is her co-author, who's also here with us today. It examines the mutual relevance between psychoanalysis and democracy through the lenses of free speech in the female body. She was awarded the 2017 Gradiva Award for her essay, What is Special About Speech? And she's also served as a consultant on the film The Tale, which premieres at Sundance in 2018. Or has it already, or is that coming up?
Yeah.
Just premiered. So her topic again is the Odyssey of Desire, not again, but the Odyssey of Desire in the Eros of free speech. Jill.
Is that on? Yeah, that works like that? Jim, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's also my great pleasure, Jonathan, that you accepted this invitation. And we should just talk about The Tale. Really, this film is amazing. But, okay. I will say it's about free speech. It's going to premiere on HBO at the end of May. And it's the story of the writer-director as she reclaims her story of sexual abuse. And it was also a great privilege to consult on that film. And I think it really is very much related to the topic of our discussion tonight. So I'm just going to start by taking you through the odyssey of how I came to write this book and develop the ideas for the book, because I have different ways of presenting this on this, and I have found that somewhere kind of just describing this odyssey seems to help me sustain the linkages of ideas. So to begin that process, I'm just going to first read an excerpt from a very famous free speech dissent by Louis Brandeis in 1927. And I want you to listen as psychoanalysts to this excerpt. Those who won our independence believe that freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think are means indispensable to the discovery and spread of political truth. That the greatest menace to freedom is an inert people. That fear breeds repression. That repression breeds hate. That hate menaces stable government. So just as Brandeis almost outdoes Freud in that excerpt, it was part of the series of dissents on. I'm just going to open this, or not. In the 1920s, I can't open. Okay, there we go. Okay. So our modern sense of free speech that we take for granted. Well, less so in this era of Trump, but the modern free speech, our commitment, our sense of what free speech or the First Amendment means to us evolved many years after the Constitution was written. And by the time Brandeis wrote these words, 1927, we know that Freud was no longer so enchanted with the prospect for free speech and free thought. He was writing just soon after that, writing Civilization and Its Discontents, and kind of had much more pessimistic, had arrived at a much more pessimistic conclusion about what man can do to emancipate himself. So, with that in mind, I want to talk about how I came to be interested in this analogy between psychoanalysis and democracy. And that evolved for me through the course of my own clinical work, as I started over many years working and writing about psychoanalysis as a process by which people claim a sense of agency and desire and gain their voice, a voice of desire. So as I started to think about that and realized as my patients evolved and claimed a certain kind of semiotic agency, that they were becoming empowered citizens, not only empowered patients, but empowered citizens. They became more politically engaged, more interested in taking their voice and their particular destiny and what they had discovered was special about themselves into the world beyond the analytic relationship. So that led me to be very interested in this way that we might think of psychoanalysis as a relationship, or that psychoanalysis has a very special contribution to make to theories of democracy and to the practice of democracy. And then I thought, why is it that we aren't thinking about that together? Why is that not being thought about, written about? So, and one of my favorite, as I started to read more about democracy, one of my favorite theorists of democracy, named John Donne, he's a theorist in Britain, I think at Cambridge University, describes the ascendance of democracy worldwide, whether it's claimed in good faith or by false claimants, as a story of the semiotic ascendance of democracy, that the dispersal of the word itself, the word democracy, it's disseminated so broadly, and people want to claim it. It has intuitive, imaginative appeal, and that in his rendering, I started to understand the survival of psychoanalysis, of democracy, as a psychoanalytic story, as a story of the democratization of a word, but a word that spells desire, that people have a natural proclivity to claim and to want to claim. Now, what's interesting to think about is that, at least with respect to our democracy, and as we know the history of psychoanalysis, both began as rebukes to tyranny, to repression, to repressive tyranny, and both at core appeal to the natural rights of man, to the desire for citizen self-rule, for agency, for self-sovereignty, and they both then established these imaginative sets of ideas and practices for claiming self-rule. Both claimed a progressive enlightenment born of truth-seeking and soul-searching, passion and faith, reason and courage. These are all brought together in both practices. And finally, well, there's much more to say, but where my interest started to land was on this very special commitment that both have to freedom of thought and freedom of speech.